Hi, it's Bethany, and this is Disability Talk, where we serve delicious disability info morsels so you don't have to ask strangers like us, disabled folks, your interesting questions. Today with us, we have the fabulous Anita Cameron. Welcome. Thank you. And we're going to start out with just doing audio description and our pronouns. So I will give you mine, she, her, and I am a white femme, little person with shoulder length brown hair, red lips, my Adapt shirt on to celebrate with Anita. Behind me, there are two shelves, one with an amethyst and a wood burning sign that says, "A riot is the language of the unheard." I have a condom bag behind me to show my interest in sexual health. And I have a button that you can barely read behind me that was from the Free Our People March in 2003, which I did with Anita. So now Anita will share with her pronoun and description.
Hi, I'm Anita. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a Black woman with medium dark brown skin. I have high cheekbones and dark brown eyes. And I have very long locked hair, what some people will call dreadlocks. I call them locks. Um, I am wearing a gray shirt with a bunch of different people and like wheelchairs and mobility equipment and canes and prosthesis and stuff like that. And it says disability is an intersection.
Very
Um,
nice.
and I just have a plain, the background is my wall. Okay.
Good for you. It's an easy description. So our first question that I ask everybody is, how does your passion in life relate to your disability or disability in general?
How does my passion
Yeah, your purpose, whatever you work on.
um that relates to my disability? Well, I don't think I would be who I am without my disability. I would be a totally different person. Um, yeah, I would be a totally different person. And so I've always had a sense of justice, I guess, growing up. Um, I was born in 1965, um, too late to participate in the civil rights movement. And I felt guilty for that. I mean, even as a young child, I knew that, yeah, that I was born too late to, help fight for the civil rights of Black folks. And so, as a small child, I made this vow, if you will, to work to make the world a better place for all. I mean, it's idealistic, but
Yes.
that's kind of what that was. I remember even writing a little essay on it when I was a young kid. Um, and that kind of followed me. I got involved in social justice
Yeah.
when I was 16,
Nice.
and I, worked with a variety of movements and causes, like the anti-nuclear, anti-apartheid, homelessness issues, LGBTQ, and then shortly after I came out at the age of 21, I found Adapt, And um, that became my purpose, disability rights and fighting for the civil and human rights of people with disabilities and fighting for disability justice. Um, and yeah, that that was, I don't know, adapt became my home, if you will, and disability rights and justice became my passion. And um, I've been doing that in a Dr. King-esque way, um, using nonviolence and nonviolent civil disobedience.
Mhm.
Um, I feel so strongly, about this that, I'm more than willing. It's nothing for me to put my body and life on the line for this. And so I've been arrested 139 times,
Wow.
and I've spent a total of months in jail. I think I probably spent more time in jail probably than any other adapter combined. I mean, it's,
Wow.
one time I spent 25 days in jail off of an adapt action.
Wow.
So, yeah,
So how long
but
have
it's
you
my
been
passion, it's my life, so I don't mind.
how long have you been with Adapt?
34 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the focus now is, can you tell us what Adapt is? Just a
Well,
bite-size idea, because it keeps I don't know
um,
what the letters mean anymore.
yeah, well, adapt is a grassroots um, national disability rights um, or slash movement. Back in the day, because when ADAPT was first formed, we were fighting for accessible public transportation and public accommodations even before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so back then it stood for Americans Disabled for Accessible Public Transit. And
Okay.
then when the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, um, we kind of harken back to our roots. Um, those gang of 19 kids coming out of nursing homes with the help of Wade Blank. Um, and so we decided to work for, at that time, to um, it was to redirect 25% of federal funding to a national program of attendant services. And so we became American Disabled for Attendant Programs Today.
Right.
And then I would say probably, I don't know, around the late 90s, early 2000s, um, we just became an acronym.
Okay.
Now, mhm, I don't know if I should. Mm, okay, I'm going to be real honest here. So, Adapt has gone through some changes, some upheaval, um, and um, and so things have changed. So let me go back to, so when we started fighting for attendant services programs and all, um, we wrote, and I sat down with Wade and Mike Allberger and a few other folks. I remember in the basement of a church in Denver, and we hammered out what would eventually become the language of uh, the Community Attendant Services Act, HR 2020, which was introduced into Congress, I want to say in 1997, eventually by Newt Gingrich. And over the ensuing decades, it morphed from Community Attendant Services Act to the Medicaid Community Attendant Services Act, MICASA, with
I remember
one
that.
piece. And then the Medicaid Community Attendant Services and Supports Act, so that was MICASA with two S's. And then the Community Choice Act. And then after that, you know, we realized that all those other iterations were, in effect, program bills, program legislation. And so we ended up, it ended up morphing into the Disability Integration Act, which was in a civil rights framework. So it became actual civil rights legislation, you know, guaranteeing people with disabilities who were incarcerated in nursing homes and other facilities, psychiatric wards, and the like, guaranteeing them the right to live in a community, and took aspects of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Olmstead Supreme Court decision and turned it into civil rights legislation rather than a program bill. So, and that was reintroduced in January of 2020. I'm sorry, January 2019, January 15th, 2019, Dr. King's birthday, on what would have been his 90th birthday. And it was introduced into the House and Senate. The House version is HR 555. The Senate version is S117. And so this past January was the year's anniversary of the reintroduction. And it has, I believe it is now 238 members of the House have signed on, and 36 members of the Senate. So it's a bipartisan, bicameral legislation. COVID-19 has certainly kind of put a stop to the in-person visits. And, you know, adapt. You know, it's sad. We celebrated the 42nd anniversary of the Gang of 19.
Wow.
They took over the intersection of Colfax and Broadway in Denver, Denver's busiest intersection. And I lived in Denver for over 20 years. And I actually used to live very close to that intersection. And so we've had 42 years, and then, you know, ADAPT is going in, you know, it's in its 36th year, 37th year, and I joined ADAPT 3 years after its inception.
Wow.
And we've been through a lot. And, you know, sadly, there's been a lot of upheaval and um, basically adapt is kind of split into um, it's just it's split up, and so I
Are they
am.
split by
I'm
racism?
sorry.
And are they split by the racist folks who don't want to change? Or are there factions now, or is it just not going to go on?
So it seems to me, and this is only my take on it, and that take may be real or not, but it seems to have split into several pieces.
Oh,
And so, um, well, let me put it like this. So, adapt had gotten to the point where, although maybe we in the inside, if you will, saw ourselves as kind of the same. You know how movements sometimes develop around a person,
yeah,
or one person becomes the face of a movement?
right,
That is what ended up happening to adapt.
right.
And so, whether we realized it or not, certainly the outside world saw the face of one person as, adapt. And you know, personalities happen,
It's true.
and human beings, sometimes when we have conflict, we don't know how to um, resolve that conflict. And so, um, personal conflict, okay, and this is my take, personal conflict happened, and we didn't know how to resolve that. And so it was allowed to fester.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the conflict went from personal issues, interpersonal issues with someone, and then it morphed into policy issues and things of that nature. And nobody was talking about it. And people refused to talk about it. People refused to deal. And
Yeah.
I remember begging leadership, anyone who would listen, look, we got to get together about this interpersonal stuff, because if we don't, something's going to pop off, and it's going to be so bad that adapt will be destroyed. And I said, no, I'm not being melodramatic. I sense it. And then 7/16/2009 happened. And I was present for that. And it was not a pretty scene. It was pretty, you know, yucky, pretty, everything you can describe. Um, and what I feel happened was, and this is what I've said, um, things went downhill because somebody said something that was pretty horrific and nasty and racist and xenophobic.
Yes.
And then a reckoning took place. And
Because it was on tape.
I'm sorry.
Because it was on tape.
Well, yeah, okay, so had, we were using Facebook Live, and had we not been using Facebook Live, that would never, you know what I mean? No one but those of us present
Right.
would have known. No one
Right.
would have been the wiser. And so, and so it 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 took off. And I have my issues with that. If you don't mind, I'm gonna go tell it. Um, so my issue with that reckoning, which I was all for that reckoning. Like I said, I was there. And so I was one of the first people to confront
Good.
because I am the daughter of an immigrant. My dad came to this country in 1945 on a boat into the port of New Orleans, back at a time when Black people in this country had no rights. But, you know, he had kind of been convinced that, you know, the United States, you know, our streets were paved with gold and anybody anything, you know, they wanted to in the United States. And so he came here and he came here. He was a legal immigrant. Not that being, you know, I think a lot of times people don't, but undocumented folks come here to save their lives
Right.
sometimes. And it's the only way that it is expensive as all get up to get into this country legally anyway to
Mm-hmm.
do. My dad, I think the only way that things were made a little easier for him was that he came here sponsored for work.
True.
Okay. And so he came here, he worked for International Harvester. He lived in Pocatello, Idaho, up near the Canadian, right on the Canadian border. And he was sponsored for work. And it was a long process. Um, he was in this country 20 years before he was able to become a naturalized U.S. citizen, the year that I was born.
Oh.
And so, you know, to hear that about immigrants, you know, and whatnot, you know, that I was pretty pissed off, you know, like, whoa, dude, you kind of, you know, you talking about me and my family.
Right.
So the reckoning began almost immediately. But what happened was, you know, then people were going in hard. And the people that was going in hard had also done, said, or been involved in racist things.
Yeah.
And so I called out in the strongest terms possible. I remember I dropped an email so full of F-bombs, it wasn't funny. And that normally is not me or how the way I mean, yeah, I cuss, okay? My nickname among certain adapt people is Sailor, okay? But, you know, I got angry at the hypocrisy because the
Yeah.
very people calling out this racism were the very people who either did or allowed to happen the terrorizing of a young woman, a young Muslim woman, on our Boston action back in 2016.
Jeez.
And a group of people terrorized this young lady. First off, this was her first action, first national action.
No.
She had been told by her chapter, she came from Chicago, okay? She had been told by her chapter, everything's gonna be fine, don't worry, you're gonna be safe, we're gonna protect you. And on her first national action, a group of ADAPT members surrounded her, tried to rip off her hijab,
Oh my God.
screamed and said nasty, horrible things to her. And she has never been back on an adapt action. And none of those people involved, uh, they were not held accountable. And as a matter of fact, when I went on my rant about this national leader who said, horrific things. I said,
Yeah.
look, y'all are so full of, it ain't funny. And,
Yeah.
y'all need to, get, you get the out of here with that
Right?
hypocrisy, because I got two words for you. And um, some of y'all that engaged in that and participated in the terrorizing of this young woman are not only still in ADAPT, you're chapter leaders, okay?
What the
And
heck?
and eventually, um, those chapter leaders did end up quitting, but they were never held accountable. And so my thing was, you know, um, you all did even worse
Right.
than this. And I said, had the right white person said what he said,
Yeah.
they would have been given a pass. And I'll tell you that, this incident happened on 7/16. On 7/18, um, there was another incident. It was recorded
Oh,
because, once again, Facebook Live. I was not present. I am director of minority outreach for Not Dead Yet. That is my day
yeah.
job. And I had a meeting with a member of Congress. I believe we were meeting with Congressman Langevin that day. So I had to go off to a meeting, and I was not present for what ended up happening. When I rejoined the group after my meeting, there
God.
was all this hubbub because another ADAPT leader went on a tirade and rant about autistic people. Needless to say, I wasn't too happy about that because I am autistic.
Oh,
And um,
right on. I didn't know that about you. I didn't remember that. So kudos.
yeah, on the spectrum, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so the person who did this ranting and raving was never held accountable
Yeah.
for the things that were
I've never
said.
heard this story.
Yeah, so it never was held accountable for the things that were said. Um, and people took up, they took up for, including this disgraced leader. And so, that was, another thing that I have referenced. If you're going to hold someone accountable, hold them accountable for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Hold them accountable, but certainly hold them accountable for the right reasons. Don't be hypocrites, and hold each one of us who does harm to others accountable. Um, and that person has never been held accountable. I know that there was some efforts, at like at facilitating a conversation between her um, and someone from um, Autistic Self Advocacy Network, a SAN, because that is who they were going off about. But that never happened, I don't think. And so, the fallout from this, you know, um, continued, and people were getting angrier and angrier. And so a group of chapters, um, originally it was Kansas, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Texas,
Yeah.
and Massachusetts, I believe. Um, split off. And I'm sorry if it seems like I'm putting dirty laundries out there, but I think it's important that we look at what happened, because, groups are kind of destroyed, like things happen and groups get destroyed, whatnot, it's just kind of tragic. So,
Yeah.
so those chapters split off, and then Montana joined. And then there were a number of chapters that stayed loyal to this person. And so that was like
Jeez.
Colorado, Delaware, Wisconsin, and a couple of other states. And we would continue to go on the Hill to do our work for, the Disability Integration Act. And it got to the point where that wasn't going to happen because, those other folks, it was like, buttons would be pushed, and, it was like, oh no, these folks aren't representing, adapt. And so where my part comes in is assumptions were made because of the chapter, because I belong to the chapter of this disgraced leader. And so assumptions were made that, and especially since I called out hypocrisy, assumptions were made that and so I was treated accordingly. Basically, I was, for lack of better words, my term, basically kicked out. It was like you either we had to publicly distance ourselves from this person, or we could not join the other side.
Wow.
And there were reasons why I could not publicly distance myself. And so I didn't. And then, and so there are a couple of chapters that decided, look, I don't want, they were like, we don't want any parts of this, so they became a factionless chapters, if you will. And then new chapters were happening, and, new chapters had to make that decision of whether they wanted to join that group or join what was then termed the real national DAP, which I personally resent that name, because I've given 34 years of my life. I'm a real adapter. And so eventually I got, shall we say, moved on out of the other side as well. I had a couple of disagreements about things, and the response was, I got kind of moved on to the side. So technically, I have no chapter. Technically, well, let's put it like this. I will be a member of ADAPT to the day I draw my last breath.
Yes.
But I am not active in ADAPT right now. And you know what? It doesn't even have to do with the breakup. In 2018, I fought for and got the permission to start the intersectionality work group, the Intersectional Justice Committee of ADAPT, because I wanted to address the systemic racism, systemic and structural racism and white supremacy going on in ADAPT, and then by extension, the rest of the disability rights movement.
Yes.
The face of disability is white. The face
Always.
of ADAPT was white. And, the time had gotten, from the time I joined ADAPT until 2014, I was a disability rights activist. 2014 happened. Mike Brown was murdered in Ferguson. And from that day forward, I stopped being a disability rights activist and became a Black disability rights activist. I could no longer separate my identities. Because see, in ADAPT, it was cool, to be disabled. It was cool even to be LGBTQ and disabled, because I'm a proud lesbian, okay?
All right.
But you could not be Black and be your authentic self in ADAPT, and you certainly can't in the disability rights movement. And so I started talking more about racism and things of that nature, and got the nickname Angry Black Woman. And then I fought for and got permission to start the intersectionality work group, the Intersectional Justice Committee. And from its inception, the response towards me from people who were not on that committee was horrific. The white fragility and white tears were, it was jaw-dropping. I was dumbfounded. Here it is. I had people who, like, for the past 20 years would tell me, "Oh, Anita, I love you." And it went from "I love you" to all kinds of, to "you're racist. You don't care about severely disabled people. I'm sick and can we drop an F-bomb? I'm sick and fucking tired of hearing about racism." To which my response was, if you're sick and fucking tired of hearing me talk about racism, what do you think I am about living it?
Yes.
I'm exhausted. I picked up the phone one day to hear a disability rights leader, the same one involved in the kerfuffle on 7/18, call me, and I'm a racist cunt spreading propaganda.
Wow.
So I have been called, almost immediately there were calls for the dissolution of the group. Chapters were saying, Anita only cares about Black people. Anita's a racist. This group only cares about Black people. When we were addressing homophobia, we were addressing, and looking at immigration issues, the water protectors. We weren't just looking at issues of race, because hello, intersectional justice.
Right.
But I talked a lot about race and gave, a couple of trainings and things of that nature. And, it just didn't. So, and this contributed, it really did. I think it contributed to the downfall. And so lately I have been getting, um, I've been asked to return, to the real, you know, return to that group, the real national adapt national. I can't remember but I've been asked here lately to return, and people begging me, please come back, please come back. And so eventually I wrote an email that should have gone further than it went. But what it said was, I'm not even going to mention that leader, whose name, who shall, remain nameless. Um, you've got your own reckoning with me. You guys harmed me, in some cases irreparably. You harmed me. You did dirt to me just because I was trying to pull adapt into the 21st century, if you will, and have us address our racial issues. I've never ever said that there were no blacks in adapt, or that adapt wasn't diverse, or that there wasn't black leadership or beloved blacks in adapt. Because see, here's the thing, adapt didn't have a Latinx issue. We had Latinx folks in all kinds of positions of leadership after a while. Okay, because back in the day, the leadership was all white males.
Yeah.
All the decisions. And that was the thing that I was saying was, hey, there were beloved black folks here in the DAP, but there was no one who looked like me making those decisions about the future of the DAP and things of that nature. And, we had, beloved Latinx leaders stepping up and being into leadership, and even being involved, in the decisions about the future of ADAPT. But blacks, that was the issue. In 36 years of ADAPT, I can count the number of black day leaders on one hand, and I was one of them. You know, and I found myself, I sadly, having to admit, being tokenized. Everything was cool when I was saying and doing what people wanted. And so ADAPT has a reckoning with me that they're not ready for. I cannot join or rejoin an organization that has not addressed and that will not address its racist past, its racist present. And I see folks from those chapters doing very performative things, showing up at Black Lives Matter marches and making statements and stuff like that. That's performative, okay? That's some feel-good stuff. Now, what are you doing to truly address racism, structural racism in ADAPT? What are you doing? What are your plans? Your tangible plans, your action plans, your deliverables, okay?
Right.
I found it, here's one of the epitomes of racism. The ADAPT chapter in Washington, D.C., here recently. You have a city that's majority black, but your ADAPT chapter is all white. And then you say, oh, we have people of color, but all of the people of color, due to the disability reasons, can't participate or whatnot, and you don't see them, okay? You say there's people of color, I don't know. I mean, the names that you give, I understand for disability reasons, they can't, but, when, like I said, when you're in a majority black city, yet your chapter is all white, there's
problem.
Okay, there's some issues, there's some
Yeah.
problems there. And then when you tell them, hey, you realize you live in a majority Black city, right? And your chapter's all white, right? And what are you doing to go out there and get you know folks in reach out, and then there would be what I would term excuses for why they couldn't. And so, to this day, I think that chapter still is lily white in a majority Black city. Um, and that was the thing. I mean, you know, you can slap pictures of Black people on the, outside of your building and say Black Lives Matter all you want. And you can show up at Black Disabled Lives Matter protests, and you can slap, Black Lives Matter this and Black Lives Matter that. But until that's not addressing the systemic racism within the organization. So um, people still have a reckoning with me to do. No one has apologized for the hurt that they caused me personally and the hurt that they did to Black, Indigenous people of color, and particularly Black folks. And, and then when the split up happened, I was seen as, you can't get in the trenches with people who see you as divisive because you're bringing up issues, that need to be brought up. And so I love ADAPT with all my heart and soul. Hey, I've given 34 years of my life. I put my body and my life on the line so many times for ADAPT. And I cherish ADAPT. ADAPT, I grew up in ADAPT. I became the person that people know me as in ADAPT.
Yeah.
And so I'm sad, but until ADAPT has some type of truth and reconciliation committee or thing going on, and until ADAPT is ready to truly and honestly address its racism in something other than performative actions, I can't be a part of that, because you can't be your true authentic Black self in the disability rights movement. It's too white. And I think that's why a lot of Blacks and people of color are kind of forming their own safe space, and whatnot, to kind of address this, or try to create space. And that's one of the things that I have been doing, is creating space for Black disabled, for us to come together, and be with each other, talk, rant, plan, uh, for how, we will uh, move forward as Black folks. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been working on trying to collect the stories, including my own, of Black people, particularly in ADAPT, particularly those of us who helped to fight for the Americans with Disabilities Act. Trying to gather those stories, just being my authentic Black self, which I cannot be, right now, and ADAPT. And there are Black folks and folks of color on that other side in the real national ADAPT. I I don't know how they're reconciling themselves to things, or whatever. Um, mad respect to them all, but for me, I mean, and I think about it, and I'm the only Black person still around and active, so to speak, you know, from the old days. Um, I am the only Black woman left um, who did the Capitol Crawl. I'm trying to think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw you were looking for photos, and I saw you were looking for photos so that you can
Yeah. So
document
I
Black
finally,
folks.
finally, someone sent me a video clip that actually, because people will find photos of other Black women, one Black woman in particular, Shayla, and they say, "Oh, that's Anita," and it's like, "No, that's not me. That's Shayla."
Ugh, your audio is gone. Wait,
Oh,
there you go.
she's not me.
Yeah.
You know, Shayla is kind of. I think she would be the only one left. I don't know if she's still doing disability rights activism after her husband died. I know she stopped and she moved on with life. I think she's came back. I don't know if she's still active in the movement. If she is, then it's she and I. But um, especially in this world of pics or didn't happen, as people tell their stories, and whatnot, as we see footage of the Capitol crawl and things of that nature, I want to, when doing HI, I got really upset because there were no stories of Black folks out there who had participated, who had helped to fight for the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so I wrote this blog post. I had my blog, Angry Black Woman. I really got to do more, on, it was probably one of the few blog posts that I wrote that went viral. But I wrote a post called We Were There Too, Black, and I updated that blog post a couple of weeks back because we still aren't getting the stories of Black folks
Yeah.
who helped to fight for the ADA, and we still really aren't getting much stories of Blacks in the disability rights movement, and I want to change that. Now, we have lots of Black leadership now, amazing young Black folks who are stepping, they're out there, they're getting out there, their names are getting out there. Um, but the full story hasn't been told. And I would like to be one of those to tell the full story.
I definitely want to hear more of that story from you. I think you have a lot to share with us. And I'm wondering, you have all these real structural problems with our movement. Do you experience joy and pleasure hanging out with disabled people or in the disabilities community? Do you get joy
Yeah,
and pleasure?
with the DAP, I mean, we had that camaraderie. That was one of the really cool things about a DAP. Was that we had that camaraderie. We looked out for each other. Um, it was ADAPT has some of the most amazing people, and so it's always fun to hang out, with folks, to break bread with folks. I feel more comfortable hanging out with people with disabilities um, than I do probably any other. Um, yeah, probably any other group, because you know, in the LGBTQ community, there's a lot of racism and ableism. You know, a lot of times I can't get Black folks outside of the disability community. You know, there's a lot of ableism um, and
Yeah.
homophobia. Um, you know, the disability community, you know, we, I mean, it's just something special, you know. And like I said, I made my home in the disability community. Um, and it hasn't been much of a home of late, and maybe I'm trying to make that home, you know, with more folks of color,
Yeah.
you know, but the disability rights community, you know, in general, that's my home.
Yeah.
No, it's where um, I don't fit anywhere else but in the disability community.
Yeah. I
But
feel
the
that.
community has to accept me as the Black, lesbian, autistic, neurodiverse, mad uh, person that I am.
Yeah.
You know, and if they're able to accept, you know, that Anita, you know, I mean, right now, I, you know, I don't know. You know, COVID has laid bare a whole, you know, bunch of things, but you know, one of the things I think that it's given me is that desire to be physically around people,
Yeah.
um, and not isolate so much, you know, because we are in this imposed isolation.
Right.
And so, you know, I am moving forward with, you know, a lot of hope for our community, you know, hope for happiness and justice,
And
uh, and true inclusion and true equity, and that that's what I'm hoping for. That's what I'm working for. You know, um, and I pray that ADAPT has that reckoning with itself, that they stop focusing on one person,
yeah.
okay, to focus on about racism and figure, okay, since you put that person out of ADAPT and you separated that person, that's great, and you don't have any more things to address when in fact you have so much
Right.
to address. You made this person your scapegoat. You made this person your sacrificial lamb, if you will, and you thought that if you sacrifice that person or if you push that person out like they did to the scapegoat, you know, they send the scapegoat on into the desert, going on out there, you know, so you dealt with your scapegoat, but you haven't dealt with your issues. You think you're cool, you know, because you pushed out, you know, a person who um, at one time did great good, but then wound up doing great harm. and you figure that, you've absolved yourself when you have not, and adapt needs to atone for the things that it's done, racially to harm people. And I hope that one day they will.
Me too.
But as for me, I'm I'm gonna always be an adapt member in my heart and head and soul. But I'm working on a lot of things, you know. And that's kind of where I am. I think I have a lot more work to do in this movement. And that's kind of where I am right now. There's a lot of work to be done
There,
still.
so just one more question about, so what are you thinking for, I mean, you've got a lot of hope, and you're right, talking about these young leaders, these BIPOC leaders. Crip Camp has been really educational and centering queer, trans, BIPOC people, and really trying to model how we can move forward and stop harming people, and do that with the principles of disability justice. So I'm curious, Anita, what do you envision for our disability justice future? What do you hope for?
I mean, I envision a movement where I mean, I don't know. I envision utopia.
Yes.
I envision, I don't know, eudaimonia. I envision happiness, equity, justice. I envision, a community where we work with each other, where I want the disability community to stop being so bloody insular, and get ourselves really involved in issues outside of ourselves. Okay? There are disabled children in those camps at the border.
Right?
There are disabled people on those reses fighting for, to protect their water and to keep those dang pipelines from going through. Don't you think, I mean, I understand that we have to fight to free our people from institutions, from nursing homes and other, you know, but we got to get out and vote.
Yes.
This is hurricane season. And trust me, I don't know if you realize, I do a lot with disaster preparedness. I'm a CERT, which is Community Emergency Response Team member. I'm a CERT instructor. I have written a lot on disability and disaster preparedness. And in the disaster preparedness arena, you would think there was no ADA. Okay?
Wow.
People with disabilities die needlessly in disaster. Okay? Incarceration. People with disabilities are sitting in jails and prisons dependent on their cellies and whomever to help them with attendant services. Deaf people are sitting up in prisons and jails with no interpreters, no nothing, not knowing anything.
Yep.
Here's the thing. I want disabled people, I want the disability community to stop being so insular. And I want the disability community to care even when it doesn't involve disabled people. Because that's what I've seen, like especially in cases of police brutality, they're white disabled asking the same things other white non-disabled people at. Why didn't they obey orders? Why did they run? Why did they do this? Why did they do that? And then you hear the person was disabled, and all of a sudden, say their name. Oh, they are disabled. And it's like, really? Really? You didn't give a rip until you found out that person was disabled? Stop caring about stuff just because it involves disability. Care about things because you care. Care that police brutality is wrong,
Yes.
whether it's people with disabilities, or non-disabled folks. Care that it's wrong to have those camps at the borders. Not just for the fact that they're disabled people, and care that children are being separated from their parents, not just because some of those kids are disabled. Care about redlining, care about racist practices that keep people mired in poverty, care about things outside of, we need to care about things outside of ourselves. We need to become a part of the world community. And, fight like hell for, people with disabilities having equity and rights and freedoms and all, but care about the world,
Yeah.
So that's what I envision.
I like it.
Will it happen?
It's a good vision.
But
you'll see some of it.
Right,
So this is the end. I really thank you for your time, and I'm wondering, Anita, do you have any projects that you want to highlight, or anything coming up? And then how can we contact you?
Well, like I said, I'm working on my gathering stories of Black disabled, um, creating those spaces for Black disabled, um, continuing my work, with Not Dead Yet, because, they're trying to kill us, okay?
Right.
Whether it's through medical rationing or these assisted suicide bills, that they're still trying to pass even during COVID.
Yep.
Whether it's through movies that portray better dead than disabled, we're in. So that's a lot mainly of what, what I'm doing, here with Not Dead Yet. The case of Michael Hickson is just, it's resonant with me on so many levels, but it shows that we have to, especially in this age of COVID, fight medical rationing.
Yes.
That is discriminatory against people with disabilities, and that has racial components and poverty components, in that, so that's the main thing that I'm doing, and then trying to get Black folks involved in the anti-assisted suicide, anti-euthanasia, movement, because we will, as assisted suicide is normalized, communities of color are going to be impacted. So that's kind of the main thing, that I've got, I'm dipping into so many, so many issues, but Not Dead Yet it's not only my day job, but it's my passion. It's, a deep passion of mine. I have been involved in Not Dead Yet since its inception in 1996. And did the National Council on Disabilities reports, a governmental report on policies of assisted suicide policies, as dangerous. And some of my work is cited in that because I've written on the criminalization of pain and how that will lead in states with assisted suicide, that will lead people to request that. I've talked a lot about the racial disparities in healthcare
Yeah.
that fuel suicide as more and more diverse states, um, enact these, pass and enact these laws, and why we need to fight against it. So, yeah, so much to be done, so little time. Definitely have to practice some self-care. And I have to remember that. Wade Blank used to tell me all the time, Anita, if you don't take care of yourself, you're no good to the movement. And he's so right, but so many of us sometimes we get so enthusiastic that we get to shaming people who want to do self-care. And, I don't even know how that looks because I can't get away from anything, You have multiple marginalizations.
Yeah.
There's no way you can get away from anything. And so sometimes I just, turn off the phone and just listen to music, or I play with my cats, or
Yes.
just daydream, because, that's the only thing that I can do that's not going to take any energy away from me, to practice some kind of self-care. So yeah, that's where I am. Those are the things that I'm thinking of, the projects that I'm working on. And like I said, doing, and you, I'm on Twitter, I'm at Adapt Anita. I'm on Facebook, Adapt Anita, Instagram, Adapt Anita. I mostly do Facebook and Twitter.
Okay.
You can catch me on email, Anita Cameron 007@gmail.com. I've been doing a lot of presentations on medical rationing, talks about disability, and my participation in the disability rights movement. I want to work on my book. I have a book out called Troublemaker.
Nice. Is that a memoir?
Troublemaker, Life of Badass Warrior Queen. And I like Troublemaker. I was so blessed and privileged to meet Congressman Lewis at an Adapt Action. And as he went through the crowd, shaking hands and hugging people, I was one of the ones that he hugged. And he told me personally, keep on making good trouble.
Nice.
And
I
so I'm
love
going to keep
him.
making trouble.
Yes. That sounds great. I will definitely be buying that book and telling everyone I know to also do that. I'm a big fan of yours. And I remember interviewing you in like the early 2010s, and you told me how you were in the Howard Zinn book that you wrote about disability for Howard Zinn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they came out with an anniversary version of that book, and my story is still there.
Yes.
And, yeah, it's still in that book, and that was that was such a neat opportunity to meet Howard Zinn. It was weird because I had gotten a complimentary version of that book, and when I heard that he was at Politics and Prose, I used to live right up the street from Politics and Prose. I took my copy of the book down there, and I went and listened to his lecture, and then I got in line, to I got in line for him, to sign books. And when I got up there, I said, "Hi, just want you to know I'm Anita Cameron." And Howard says, "Huh?" And I'm like, "I'm Anita Cameron." And I opened the book to that. I said, "That's me."
Yes.
And he jumped up, he hugged me, him and Anthony Arnold, his co-author and editor, and they were like, "Here, you sit down with us. You sit down with us." And they had me sign books right along with them, And so
That's so
you know, I
cool.
had some really, really cool experiences being involved in the disability rights movement. My training and my education is I'm a scientist.
Oh,
I have a degree in biology. I actually went to medical school, um, but was put out because of my disabilities. I was losing more eyesight. My seizures were intractable. Um, and I remember being so depressed and felt like such a failure and a loser. And I remember, but now, I think, a doctor, had I, you know, had the ADA been around back then, I would probably be a doctor, probably a successful one. But I would think, you know, in the doctors' careers, they see and treat and help hundreds, sometimes thousands of patients. In my work with ADAPT, I've actually helped millions of Americans, and helped to fight for millions of Americans. And that is, what I take with me. Um, that I think already, I hope I've helped enlightened millions, and I'm humbled by that. And, sometimes people do stuff and you get an ego. I'm just humbled. Every honor that I get, it is humbling. Um, and it just reminds me that I'm here and that I am blessed and privileged and able to do these things. And I do it not for me, but there's so many of us out there who can't,
right.
who cannot or
Yep.
who will not, you know, um, who would never dare. And I'm 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 there for those folks who can't. That's who I am for. I mean, and legacy. I mean, I hope that more people are able to speak out and have a big mouth and fight for justice.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for your time, Anita. I hope you
Thank
can take some time for self-care today,
I
while fighting
am.
for
I mean,
justice.
I've got a couple of things to do, but I'm definitely going to rest and maybe close my eyes and maybe play with my kitties. And my wife is off work, so I'll probably watch TV or something with her. So
Cool.
yeah.
Well, enjoy that.
After
And
work, of course.
I know we all do, right? Capitalism. It is a bitch. Well, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day, my dear.
Thank
Take
you. You
care.
too. You too.